Hi, Tom Lynch here for In Focus Fridays. The last quarter of every year, particularly the time around the holidays, is a tremendously important time for giving to organizations like the Hutch. Today, I'm talking with Kelly O'Brien, who's our Vice President for Philanthropy, about the unique giving season that we're experiencing. This past weekend, we substituted the Hutch Holiday Gala, which I was very much looking forward to when I came, for a virtual celebration of fearless science, which turned out to be absolutely extraordinary, but very different. Been broadcast live on our social media channels and viewed by supporters in half the country. We featured our donors, we featured our researchers, and shared some interesting What the Hutch moments with Guppy, which was absolutely extraordinary, the best part of the night. And we ended the night with a performance by Sheryl Crow, who spoke about the importance of our work through her own experience as a cancer survivor. So clearly, the work of philanthropy has endured this year, despite all the challenges and all the difficulties. And Kelly, your leadership has been absolutely extraordinary during this time. So just tell me, how have you and your team adapted this year? How have you made this year work despite all the obstacles and all the excuses for not getting it done?
Thanks so much for focusing some time on fundraising. As many people know, you are also a fantastic partner in this work to inspire generosity in our community. I'll just start by saying the philanthropy team has been relentless in recreating, reinventing, figuring out how to connect donors with our mission. And everything about our work has changed. We are used to bringing people to campus so they can see the impact of their gifts. We're used to meeting with donors face to face to talk about our priorities and their priorities. And we're used to having big in-person events, whether it's Oblateride or Gala. And all of that has really been put on pause due to physical distancing. So creativity, resiliency, and keeping our mission front and center, why we do the work we do, I think has helped our philanthropy team stay strong.
So Kelly, I guess one of the fundamental questions, and many of the people who are watching this are philanthropists themselves. Some people have never given to anything, and other people give to their church or their synagogue or their mosque or a religious organization. I guess the question I'll ask you, why do people give?
So believe it or not, there are actual PhD studies on the whole science of why people are generous. For me, in my experience, and I've been doing this for over 30 years, I think it comes from an intrinsic desire to help humanity. Quite literally, the meaning of the word philanthropy. I think each of us wants to give in some way to make life better for people around us. And in return, we get an awful lot of satisfaction about it. Many donors say that it is more meaningful to them to have that experience of seeing what happens in our lab than even knowing how many other people they're helping.
And as somebody who's been in philanthropy, both in the arts and now in cancer research, why do you do it? What brought you into the field of philanthropy?
So it was go to law school or get a job, so I was fortunate enough to go immediately to work for my alma mater in the Alumni Annual Fund. And to be honest, it came about because I had done an awful lot of volunteering. And I think when you give back and sort of serve in different ways as a volunteer, it naturally lends itself to then thinking about other ways to donate and contribute. And so for me, it was an evolution from something I was doing in my personal life to professional life. And I would say stuck with it because I truly can't imagine a better job. Many people say, I can't even imagine raising money, asking someone for money. But for me, I can't actually imagine doing something else. Being able to support people like our scientists, I wake up every day absolutely excited about what we're making possible.
And I would share that I'm really impressed that your team cares so much about the science at the Hutch and about knowing and understanding the science and being able to explain elements of the science to our donor community. It's really extremely impressive how that works. Tell me a little bit about what the giving environment is like now. How has COVID changed the way you and your team go about their work?
Absolutely. I first just want to credit our faculty. They make our jobs easier because they spend time with our department and with our donors. So our ability to make real what's happening in our labs is really in partnership with our faculty. So thank you for crediting us. I just also want to throw a little bit of thanks back to everybody that works in the labs that helps bring the science to life.
Yeah.
So in terms of COVID, we were, I would say, quick in the spring to share our leading role in tracking and testing, the role that we were going to play in vaccine and therapies, and really assert the leadership role that Fred Hutch was playing and bring our community into that work. Part of that happened through the national media attention and local attention. You know, people think of us as a cancer place. And so learning how much work we had already done in infectious disease provided that momentum for asking people to help us. We raised about $8 million in the spring, summer, specifically to jumpstart or fill gaps in COVID fundraising. But we also heard from our community that they care deeply about cancer, and they were worried that we might lose momentum on studies focused on curing cancer. And so I would say that the pandemic has caused people to evaluate their priorities. It has also meant that the need for shelter, for food, for access to healthcare, access to education means people are thinking long and hard about what they want to support. We've been fortunate that our community understands the urgency around science, and we have been reaching out, whether it's through virtual events, a lot of phone calls. You've met with hundreds of donors through Zoom calls, and you and our scientists have connected with thousands of people through the virtual town halls that we've been doing. So all of that has helped spur the generosity that we're seeing.
Yeah. Just kind of going to ask you a hard question now, and because of the year we've had. I actually had participated in a forum on anti-racism and philanthropy, and you have also been someone who's been very involved in anti-racist training and development efforts here at the Hutch. How do you square the two processes that we're going through as a society? The fact that we are dealing with an important social justice issue in our world, at the same time that we're asking for donations of money primarily from wealthy, not all, but primarily wealthy white people. How does that play within the way you think about philanthropy and the trends in philanthropy? How do you make those two causes and those two ideas work together?
So I'll start by saying I have been really fortunate. Hutch has had a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that is something that our team feels strongly about. The experiences over the spring and summer, whether it was Breonna Taylor or George Floyd, brought that more to light for our own team and our own personal commitment to learn more about anti-racism and how we help further the Hutch's mission. We know cancer doesn't discriminate, and we know that there are disparities in how people experience access to both screenings, diagnosed later, access to clinical trials. And so if we say we want to cure cancer, that has to be for all of humanity, and that means we have to double down on engaging communities of color in our work, inviting people to support us, whether that's as volunteers or as donors. And I would say it also means we need to be more conscious of our blind spots. Most people think about philanthropy as a passion of the wealthy, and yet the reality is 95% of our gifts come in from donors under $1,000. We know in Seattle there is a wide-ranging support for causes, and we need to make science more important to more people. So we're working on it, and I would say the commitment that you and Dr. Buckley have evidenced in terms of how philanthropy can fuel the scientific mission of the Hutch is part of what we want to make sure our donors also are committed to.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. That one of the reasons that I feel so strongly aside. I mean, obviously the moral imperative is enormous, but in addition to the moral imperative, there is the scientific imperative, and I think you're right. That diversity, equity, inclusion has to be important in that. And I guess the last question I'll ask you is, from my perspective and Steve Staten's perspective and David Browdy and Nikki Robinson's perspective, we rely on philanthropy for about 15% of our operating revenue. And when when we have a tough year for philanthropy, it impacts our ability to accomplish our mission here. How sustainable is that in the future? Tell me what your thoughts are about what philanthropy is going to look like in the next 2, 3, 4 years.
So the Fred Hutch is a bit unique in that 16% coming from private donations is actually low for a nonprofit. Many arts, theater, social services organizations rely on up to 50% of their annual budget from donors. We have such extraordinary success with federal grants and competitive grants that philanthropy has always been filling the gaps or as startup funds for those more innovative pilot projects. I think the economy is going to be a factor for all nonprofits, and that's where ensuring that people really understand how their dollars go immediately to work in labs and the impact that they're having will help keep us towards the top of people's priority list. I also think that there is an extraordinary amount of wealth in our community, in our nation, and that wealth is often directed towards academic medicine and research. And so about 9% of all funds given in the United States annually go to that sector, health, academic medicine, research. Mm-hmm. And so we can hope to maintain some strength in that in spite of the sort of headwinds that we're facing.
So Kelly, I want to thank you. I want to thank you and your team for everything you do to talk about the Hutch to our donor community, for the way that your team has become so involved in understanding the science of the Hutch and telling the story about the remarkable things that happen here. I'm Tom Lynch, and that's In Focus Fridays.